What's up, y'all? This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I did some research on a guy this week.
And I've been privy to this guy for most of my life.
Who are we talking about?
We're talking about Stan Lee, the Marvel mastermind.
Woo! Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Real quick, Stan Lee was an American comic book writer, editor, publisher, and producer. He rose through the ranks of a family-run business, Marvel Comics.
You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it.
Rose through the ranks to become the creative primary leader for 2 decades, leading an expansion from a small division publishing house to a multimedia corporation that dominated the comic book industry and now the cinema industry.
And Avengers is coming out, or it has
today.
come out today.
It'll be today. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's why we're talking about him. How
we're
did this
going tonight
happen?
at 10:45.
You're going pre-booked?
Well, okay, so we'll cover this straight out. I'm not huge on the most recent of the Marvel ones. I personally like the early 2000 ones with like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man,
Right.
the original X-Men. I even like the Ben Affleck Daredevil director's cut. I'm into more of those. So like I was still with it when they get to Iron Man, but once I
That's
realized
honestly
that they
like
were
the start for everybody else.
I was with it, and then when I realized they were trying to distance away from the other movies and really starting, that's when I was like, I kind of like these, and so they just have kept going down that train, and it is what it is now. But I just feel a little less connected. But I haven't seen them all, but I've kept up here and there. Like I did not see Ant-Man, I didn't see those, but I saw the last Avengers. I've seen like the major ones.
I think we'll talk a little bit throughout the history of these things, how, it is seasons and times in the culture and what's going on and how it is able to adapt. Like people still, go see Shakespeare plays and they put different modern spins on them, or they do different things to them, or they change the gender of the characters, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Stan Lee's not opposed to that. And so in all of these creations, there's a lot of moving things around to fit what people are interested in. The multiverse. Should I just jump right in?
Yeah, let's get
From the very start, Stanley Lieber is his name. Romanian parents, first generation American. He was born in 1922, so grew up in the Great Depression, which majorly affected his personal life. His father always looking for work. He went to DeWitt Clinton High School, which is in New York. He grew up in one of the suburbs. So DeWitt Clinton High School, huge all-boys school, 12,000 students. They
all boys, huh?
It stopped being all boys in the 1980s.
Oh.
But it has so many, if you go look it up online, so many famous alumni. Not in the year that he was, but the two dudes who both guys, Kane and Finger, who created Batman, came from that school, as well as Ralph Lauren.
Oh, wow.
Tracy Morgan. And the kid who's now the rapper, A Boogie. He went to the same school as Stan Lee.
Wow.
So just tons and tons of stuff. But obviously you can see if there's 12,000 boys, you're going to kind of get lost in the shuffle. And so he was very bookish and reading books and minding to himself. He did work for the magazine of the school and but just didn't really stand out that much.
I wonder if he still sounded like a 70-year-old man at 12
I think of
years
his
old.
voice.
Excelsior! Yeah. He's walking around, Stan.
I did listen to some of his early interviews when he still doesn't have white hair, and and he does kind of sound that way. So he graduates the school in 1939. So he's had some odd jobs in high school. No chance of going to college at this point. But he has some odd jobs in high school. And then goes on to straight away work for this company called Timely Comics. And this is a subdivision of a larger...
So at this time, is he, knowing he wants to, is he thinking he wants to be, a colorist or a cartoonist or, what?
He wanted to be... He wanted to write. He wanted to write the great American novel.
So at this point, he's trying to be Catcher in the Rye?
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So comics are not what he's aiming to do. That's just a writing thing.
Yeah, and there was some familial relation that was able to... It's ambiguous how exactly it worked out, but some connection helped him get this job.
Well, he had a small loan from his father.
Or it was like his cousin's nephew's uncle was the guy who did whatever in there. So he got this. It's a whole big publishing company. The guy who runs it is Martin Goodman, who he will come up throughout this because he's he's very concerned with the business of it, as he should, because it's the business. But he's very much like, okay, this is a smaller division. We've got magazines, we've got other things. Here's this small section called Timely Comics. There's only 2 guys in it, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And Stan Lee comes into this thing. He's basically just the production assistant, gopher guy. He's filling up the inkwells. He's sweeping up the pencil shavings. He's getting them sandwiches. And
I'll take care of that, boss. Don't worry. I'll be right there.
And that's all he's doing the whole time. It's just the same voice. Mostly what they were doing, though, at this time with the comics was just these men's pulpy magazines, meaning like sort of lewd or provocative. That was what was selling at the time.
Like
Not really.
Tijuana Bible type. Yeah.
Definitely not a career of great esteem or desire. So he's like, I'm just doing this because we need money. And like I said, the looming sense of his father's career and this stuff going on was very, very much, he's just like, I got to keep working, and which then later applies to his work ethic further down the line, because he was just so concerned with, I can't not be working. I was interested in this. His bosses, so Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, they're only 27 and 23. It's not like they're these 50-year-old men who've been in the business for a long time. Exactly.
Cool, yeah.
So then Superman comes out in 1939. Right when he gets this job, so that sort of changes their comics. But again, Martin Goodman, the boss, the main publisher, he's like, oh cool, we're just gonna copy whatever anybody else is doing that's successful. So let's get on some superhero stuff,
One of
right?
those, yeah.
Yeah.
He had the idea. We're still doing it.
Yeah. So they came up with Namor the Submariner, who's still a Marvel property, and the Human Torch, which has nothing to do with the Fantastic Four. But those were their 2 main characters, and then they came up with Captain America in 1940. And in 1941, so the year after Captain America came out, they gave Stan Lee a chance. So he did 2 pages, and this was just like prose. It wasn't even part of the actual comic, because it was all different. They would put out a comic that's 20 pages or whatever it was, and then there'd be 3 or 4 different stories, and then some other, and then they give him a couple more things to do.
So he gets the leftover pages and makes what he can of it, and gets a little more here and there.
But again, he's still like, I don't want to do this comic stuff. So this Simon and Kirby,
not gonna lead to anything. This is waste of time.
I want to write the great American novel.
I'll catch you in the rye.
It's in the back of his mind this whole time. Simon and Kirby, his bosses, get fired because so this is the start of, and if there is something to be a controversy, it's here. So Simon and Kirby are fired because, according to Kirby, Simon is like less of a judgmental, angry guy.
What a classic group name, Simon and Kirby. They sound like some sort of like 20s like comedy act.
Yeah, and they have a...
Please welcome Simon and Kirby! Yeah!
And they have a little, like, mannequin dummy that's half of the act, yeah.
Anyway, continue. Simon and Kirby get fired.
They get fired because, according to Kirby, Stan Lee ratted them out because they were moonlighting for DC. Because they were just... Everybody was trying to get work everywhere, any which way, and so they were doing stuff on the side, and so Martin Goodman's like, this can't happen, and Stan Lee knew about it, but Kirby thinks that he told him or whatever.
Well, is it true? Is he admitting it's true?
What?
That he was moonlighting?
No, they were.
Come out and said it.
Yeah, no, they were. But it was just the fact that he said that Stan Lee told on them.
Yeah, but the point is they were moonlighting for DC Comics. Why is that ever valid? It's like, yeah, but he told, and it's
well, this is
and now we know.
Right. So this is where the resentment stems from throughout the whole career of what's going on, and they come back much later in the story. So now they're gone, and the reason he's called Stan Lee, even though I said at the beginning his name is Stanley Lieber, is because comics are stupid, according to him at this point, and he doesn't want to have his real name on it. So he just went by Stan Lee.
Wow.
And so then that was his comics writing name, and so he just kept that for the comic book.
If you ever see some, like, gross, pulpy Tijuana Bible written by Evan Russ, I didn't do it.
It was a dark time.
You're traveling in South America, and you come across
like, what is this piece of trash? Who is this? So now that they're gone, they got to find another team, right?
Yeah.
For this thing.
Is
Martin Goodman's like,
yeah.
He's like, nah, you can do it. So he takes over everything. He's
Cool.
the art director, he's
Oh,
the
wow.
editor,
He's everything.
and he's getting freelance people to help him
Hell
out.
yeah.
He uses multiple names in this time frame because it can't be a one-man show.
The credits. It's
Yeah.
George Lucas, George Lucas, George Lucas, George Lucas. I made fun of that so much as a 5-year-old. I just went, I'm George Lucas, I'm everything.
Because it's like edited by, yeah. So he goes by Neil Natz, which is just Stan Lee backwards for some of the art direction. He goes by Stan Martin because his middle name is Martin.
Mm-hmm.
He's just adding all these fake names into the thing because he's a 19-year-old publishing comics.
It's like the score for Halloween, the John Carpenter film. The score is credited to the Kentucky Bowling Green Philharmonic, which does not exist.
Oh, they just wanted it to sound
They just
more.
didn't want it to be John Carpenter.
Oh.
Yeah, he wanted it to. He wanted it to sound more robust.
funny.
He's like, he's just from Bowling Green. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, the Bowling Green Philharmonic does not exist.
I wonder how many people in their early career do that, where it's like, actually,
yeah.
most of the stuff that we think of is just one person trying to make it look like that's more important than it actually is.
Yeah.
Or just to add value. He's 19 years old. He's on his own. He's editing. He's art directing. He's doing all of this stuff. And then the next sort of phase of his journey in the 40s, of course, World War II. So he enlists in
here
the
we
army. 1942.
Stanley in World War II. Now that's a movie.
Yeah. He enlists. He wants to fight. And they're like, nah, you're too smart. We're going to use you for something else. So he starts doing these instructional films, the cartoons.
Oh, cool.
He's still freelancing for Timely Comics on the side, though. They're sending him stuff, and he's sending it back. He's going
Got
through
that
the mail.
side gig.
But he's traveling around. He's writing training manuals in the form of comics. I think we said in the Dr. Seuss episode, this is when they link up for a time.
Right. Oh, cool.
In this span
Here
of
we
time.
Are.
So it's interesting also because we said that Dr. Seuss already had an illustrious career in advertising, whereas Stan Lee is just a kid here.
Right.
Wow,
That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. So
I love that we only covered that a couple weeks ago, and then now here we are telling we're treading the
other-
same waters.
Yeah.
Different directions, all the paths we go.
This is the connection between them. And then he's back at it at the end of the war, 45. The problem is comics are still seen as chump work. A lot has changed in the war. No more superheroes. Of course, Martin Goodman's like, well, you know what's popular? Forget the superheroes again.
I love this guy.
So it's like...
What's selling? Do it!
Yeah, every picture of him, he has a cigar.
Oh, yeah, I knew it. For those listening, I was miming a cigar, and I was spot on.
2 fingers. So he's like the Archie stuff, the, high school romance, the silly relationship, humor type stuff. That's what's selling now. So we're going to go for that. And then just it hits every single genre. It's like, oh, sci-fi's popular now. We're going to go into that.
Dude.
Romance is popular. Westerns are really big. Crime stuff is really big. So they're just hitting all of these different angles.
Man, that must have been fantastic to just be able to be a writer. Because you're just like, man, that's my dream, is to be assigned. Do this now. Do something totally different. Now do something totally different. And it's gotta have a blue shoe, or we don't get the money on the like whatever. Yeah, like I love that
and
kind of stuff.
And the constraints and the limitations behind.
I that's the stuff I just thrive on. So I'm just like, oh, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Just being like, now it's a Western this week because it's popular, kid.
Well, he says in his thing, he's like, we did so many something the kids for these Westerns. So they're just branching out all over the place, doing all this kind of stuff. This is where his not yet, but soon to be wife comes into the picture.
Here she walks in. Oh,
Here she walks in. Joan.
through the frosted window.
So he gets connected, and somebody is like, oh, I want you to meet this girl. And he meets up with her. He's like, oh, I love her immediately.
I knew it.
Embarrasses himself in front of her. He's like, oh, we're going to marry. The problem is, so she's from England. She's a model in New York. And she came from England.
I love. No.
But she got married as a war bride coming over to some stupid army guy when she was in Europe. And then they go over together, and she's like, I don't want to marry this guy. But the divorce law in New York is super tough to get a divorce.
Oh, yeah.
So, but
Different time.
the place in the U.S. where it is not a problem is Nevada, Reno. So he's like, I'm going to send you over to Reno so you can divorce this guy, and then we're going to get married. Because you just got to be a resident for like 6 weeks or something.
Tight.
In Nevada, and then you can get your divorce filed. So he flies back over there. They get the divorce, go to the next door in the courthouse, get married. They...
You're mine now. There's nothing you can do about it.
They were
Lockdown.
married for 69 years.
Oh my gosh, that is beautiful.
Yeah, she died at 95 in 2017.
Yeah,
And then he died at 95 in 2018.
What a gorgeous life.
Yeah. So she is not going to be really
Wait,
mentioned.
hold on. Let's go back.
Yeah.
What you just described sounds exactly like parts of the plot to The Notebook.
That probably
Not
happened
all
to
out
everybody
run out,
in the 40s.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe it's just a 40s story. Maybe that's all.
So she's not going to feature too much in this, but just keep in the back of your mind that she's
There's a strong,
supporting him behind him on the
supportive
way
woman all the way
in
through.
all of this. She does show up one more time, which we'll get to, which is his turning point and how he was able to make the jump to what he really liked doing.
Oh.
But she's in it to win it all the time. Joan is her name.
Incredible, Joan.
But they're still in limbo because comics are not a success. So we've moved through the 40s, now we're hitting the 50s. Another player enters the arena. It is this guy Wortham. Burn comic books. He hates them.
Oh.
He's this psychologist, psychiatrist, wrote this famous
Burn his
book.
birth certificate because he got to change that name. Wortham.
It's Wortham. Comics are no longer seen as quality. Well, I mean, I guess they were never quality, but they're no longer seen as reputable to be given to children.
Right.
They sort of fall in the dark path. There's a full Senate investigation. There's a new, I don't know if you were familiar with the Hays Code in film, where it was around the same time where it was these unofficial censorship laws, and you had to get this seal of approval, and if you didn't, it was essentially a non-film and blacklisted and removed from whatever. So this is the same thing as the comics code, where it was like you can't show vampires and werewolves. If there's a crime being committed, it has to be off the page, and it can't be done to these specific people. There can't be any mention of drugs. There can't be all of these stipulations for this thing. And it's like, well,
I kind of love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. They didn't like it in the 50s. They didn't want it. So now,
I mean the limitations of like, because like you telling me the roads I can't go down, well, you're definitely highlighting the ones I can't. You know, like that for me, you're like, that's not, closed doors is not, that's just a personal thing. Closed doors is not a dead end for me.
It just sucks for the comic book industry because now they were doing all of these westerns and crime and horror and thriller, and that's what was popular to people. And now they can't do any of that. So they're like, well, like Martin Goodman's like, well, what are we going to do? What do the people want? We can't do what the people want. Yeah, we can't do what the people want. So there's this huge drought for comics distribution. Stan Lee has to fire his friends. They were making 70 different comics, and now they're only, because they had to sell also to somebody else who bought them. As a part of the deal, they're like, well, we're going to completely close this down, basically, and you can only make 8 comics a month as opposed to 70.
Gosh.
So they have to get rid of a lot of people.
Heartbreaking. Your friends
like,
and...
Yeah, he's like, this is tough. Or at least the freelancers, because he's still kind of a one-man show. So the 50s sweep by. In 58, you know, it's a whole roller coaster with this comic books industry. But he ends up hiring on this guy Ditko, and then he hires on Kirby again. Who was his old boss,
Kirby,
to be an illustrator. So that's tension. This is kind of like the sinking ship of the comic book industry. It's a last resort. I want to go into in this time frame because when Kirby comes on is when you really start to see his style and the way he goes about making comics and why this was so different from what was going on with DC, with these other places, and essentially why Stan Lee is regarded as the ultimate comic book guy. Right?
Yeah.
So they dub it the Marvel method now. It was Stan Lee's method, but it's the way that you make comics. So traditionally what you would do is, or I guess I'll relate it to films, like you have a script and it's got everything in it. It's got the dialogue. It's got who's doing what. It's got what's going on in the visual elements. And then you hand that off to somebody else and then they make the film. With comics, that was very much the case where you'd have the script and it'd be like in panel 1, this is what's going on. We look at the city, and then in panel 2, we get closer in on the superhero as they're talking about whatever, and then they have the dialogue, all that stuff. Stan Lee, to his credit, because they needed to keep churning things out, and because he was just, I feel like he's, even for all his bravado, he's a pretty humble dude and trusting of other people for this. So he comes up with the plot. It's very much like a short hour-long workshop kind of thing where he's like, here's what's going on here. He has all the ideas. He's got the ideas for the characters, what they're going to be doing, that kind of thing. And then he just says, go draw it. Leave me space for the narration and the dialogue in each page. And do it and come up with the 20 pages.
Oh, weird.
So he's like, we need to get from here to here.
Yeah.
This needs to happen in the middle, and this is kind of what I'm thinking. but they come up with the costumes, they come up with the characters, they come up, and he just has all of the verbiage and the narration and the dialogue. And so that's his signature style,
wow.
is how it sounds. It sounds very colloquial, very like, like a friend talking to you, over the top in the descriptions, and that's why he had the amazing Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
He just really upsells it to people.
I thought, wow, incredible. Everything was
everything. Incredible Hulk, yeah. that was his thing.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
But just
He loved no.
the freedom, and so when people come on later, they get totally choked up. But Jack Kirby is super into this. Even, and that's what's interesting, is in spite of their tensions, they work so well together. And I wonder too if that's even part of it, is because they were so at odds. Like if they were in the room together the whole time,
bit of a competition,
working on it,
you're bringing your best, you know.
But because of this ambiguity to the creative process, it has created a lot of animosity between Kirby and Stan Lee, or at least Kirby. Stan Lee's like, I don't know what this dude's talking about.
Yeah.
But like, Kirby's like, no, I created stuff. I came up with Spider-Man. Because you don't hear about Kirby as much. It's just like Stan Lee, the creator of all this stuff. And it really was Stan Lee wasn't drawing anything. So it was half and half. But to say that somebody created it, it's tough.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that he did start putting in, before anybody else, he came up with putting in all of the credits in the comics for who did what.
Oh.
Because nobody even know who was making the comics.
Wow.
And so, in spite of the fact that Kirby's like, he didn't give us any credit and it's a Stan Lee everything, even within the comics, he was like, no, it was drawn by this, it was lettered by this, it was colored by this.
What are you talking about? Did you read the back?
Yeah.
Did you see? Your name's in it, man. No.
But he becomes the face of Marvel. He becomes the face of comic books because of his bravado and because he's the one that is orchestrating it all. So Stan Lee had that charisma to act as the face of the thing, and by proxy, Kirby's image and the way that he was represented got downplayed in the creative process. So that's kind of what's happening.
Doesn't sound as ruthless as what happened with the Batman creator. Are you aware of that?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I've forgotten a lot of the story, but for anybody interested, there's a wonderful documentary on Hulu that they produced about the other guy that helped.
It's Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and I'm sure Bill Finger is
the other one. Yeah. So they've only now retroactively are going back and putting him on everything that's being made thus forth. So it's just a fascinating story, and there's just a beautiful documentary about it. I highly recommend. That's very, very similar to this, but this Bill Finger got intentionally screwed. Where this sounds more ambiguous and more just like accidental, and it's just like
So that's the 50s. Yeah, they're still churning out paltry content that he doesn't really care about. Always in the back of his mind, I'm supposed to be writing a great American novel. What on earth am I doing? It's 1960. He's almost 40 years old now, which is about the same time as his father started losing his jobs and work in the Great Depression. His father was around 40 years old, so it's like this is the time where, again, comics are in a slump. Martin Goodman's like, what are we going to do? What do the people want?
Martin Goodman scratching at that desk again. What do we do? I love this guy.
Yeah, he's a mess.
Just constant like worry, just like what's happening this week?
But it's great for Stan Lee because they're just churning, and then that's why he adapted his process, because he's like, we got to keep stuff going. We got to get these artists paid. They can't be waiting for 2 weeks for me to come up with a script, so I'll just tell them something, let them draw, we'll figure it out, on to the next thing.
I love when especially artists, man, find a workflow to just make the magic happen. It's like the South Park guys, like it's incredible what they get done, how fast they get it done, how dialed in it is, except none of it's written. It's insane.
It's
There's
a type
also a
of
documentary
process.
about that if you want to go find that.
The South Park documentary.
Just about how they make it. It's like 24 hours to air or something like that is what it's called. And it just is, you're with them in their studio from beginning to end on an episode, and they do it in like no time flat. It's nuts. But I just love because it's totally unorthodox. Nobody does. They figured it out themselves because it was the necessity of the project. This is how we have to do this. If we're going to make this content that's going to say this every week or every month, whatever, however often it was, it has to be done on they just figured out what they needed to get what they needed to do to get what they needed. And it's just nuts. So I just love seeing anybody find a workflow that's unorthodox that just does produce results.
Yeah.
Especially, I love it when artists do.
It also makes Stan Lee, in this case, indispensable.
Yes.
Because it's like you can't, if that, and that's a huge thing in a workplace where it's like,
Absolutely.
if you need, not just, like, you can't train anybody to do this. He's the only one that has the mental capacity. And now that he's 40, the experience, because this is the only job he's done since he's left high school.
Golly.
Even in the war, he was still doing it.
And so is he down, like, okay, because we were just saying, he's still in the back of his mind wanting to write the great American novel. How heavily is that weighing on him by 40? You know, he's now,
So
like
this
you
is
said,
the
he's
linchpin.
like,
This is the,
when
yeah.
his dad, same time as dad started losing his job, losing his way. Now he's reaching it.
The comics
He hasn't
industry is
done
now
what
in
he,
another
the comics
downturn.
industry, he's ridden this wave since he stepped out of high school. The comics industry is going down into the toilet again. But it's like he's never done what he wanted to. I could have, like, I'm not 40 yet, but I already feel like a failure. It's like,
Oh, no.
It's like I can't imagine what that would feel like to be that much further down the road and still feel like you haven't gone anywhere. But let's be real, it's pretty incredible what he's been doing.
Right.
But in his eyes, he's, it's not what he wanted. He's still got a goal. So, like, how heavy is that weighing on him at this point?
Well, so he's basically ready to be done.
Mm.
Comes home. This is where Joan comes back into the picture.
Oh.
And she's like, look, you gotta... He's basically like, I don't care what's going on. We can switch jobs. We can move. We can do whatever. And she's like, you should make something that you want to read. Again, superheroes are sort of in a downturn again.
Yeah.
But
Good advice.
But this is what he's interested in. And he's like, at the very least, Martin Goodman will not care if it doesn't sell because it's already not selling anyways.
Right. Now's the time. Nothing to lose.
Exactly. And so he's like, I want to do something that has the humanity to it. Now, it's not like it's never been done before where, we're going to be relating to these characters. But in the superhero genre, that was not necessarily the case. So the first thing he comes up with is the Fantastic Four, where he's saying, okay, well, what if I had extraordinary people in extraordinary circumstances trying to live an ordinary life? And it was also a big deal that they didn't have masks on. Like, everybody knew that Reed Richards was Mr. Fantastic, who was married to Sue Storm, whose brother was the Human Torch.
That first step into the...
And they each have their own complications that they have to relate to as a family, and they stick together as a family. But they go on these crazy adventures and whatever. But there's definitely a human element to it that was never seen before. And also, they're like not perfect. Like, Reed Richards is this lanky, awkward scientist, and then he gets powers, and he stays a lanky, awkward scientist.
So it did not like change his entire perception of the world. It didn't fix all. Like, we all have the things we wish we could change, but if we snapped our fingers and changed those things, would it actually achieve the goal we really want?
Yeah. So he puts it out. This is not the social media time, so they put it out, and then 3 months later is when it goes to print, and then they get the whatever. So they're getting a lot of letters in, and he's like, "Oh Lord," because usually what happens with the letters is because people want a refund because there was some technical defect in the printing of their book, or like it's off center, and they're like, "Wow, we want our money back." So he's getting all these letters about it, and they're fan letters saying how amazing it is.
Oh wow!
And he's big on answering these letters, so he's answering all of them.
I wonder how much one of those goes for auction on that TV show. It's like, here we have an original Stan Lee fan
Fantastic
letter.
Four.
Fantastic Four dated 19... What was it? Yeah. It's like...
You watch the QVC.
No, I'm thinking... I can't remember the name of it. It's it's where people bring in their old...
Antiques Roadshow.
Antiques Roadshow! Man, where have they been? Oh,
they're still on PBS.
Oh, thank God.
Season 1 million.
I was hoping it wasn't like Richard Simmons.
No, go on.
If you're wondering where he is, go look it up.
He's gone. And he's never coming back.
Never, ever. But I want to say, I wonder what one of those old, I wonder what Stan Lee handwritten things would go for, like from the 60s, like from the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Well, especially now. He has a private museum library kind of thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where they have a lot of his stuff. Because he was also, because of the churn of this, he didn't really save anything. He's like, it was a script, and then it was on yellow paper, and then we threw it away. You know what I mean? We're making 7 trillion
garbage.
things.
I want to write the great American novel.
Yeah. So he didn't really. So that's also. It's probably worth a lot more
Right.
now because of
Oh
that.
man.
You know.
Time? What year?
So this is in the early '60s.
Okay.
Yeah, because in 1960 is when he turns 40. His wife gets back with him and is like, "Yo, you gotta make what you want." So they're still doing their thing. Superheroes are coming back. People are loving this stuff.
Fantastic Four was a hit.
Fantastic Four was a hit. Fan letters all over the place.
He answered them.
So then it becomes its own thing. He comes to Goodman against his better judgment and is like, "Hey, I want to do this thing called Spider-Man."
Huh? Spider what?
And so he explains it to him. Goodman's like, "Nah, you can't do that. A, people hate spiders. B, teenagers are sidekicks. They're not superheroes. And C, heroes are supposed to be heroic. They're not losers. Get out of here."
Threw it at him as he went out there. And don't come back till you have something good.
Yeah. People want westerns. So Stan
That's what they
Lee,
say this week.
he puts it in Amazing Fantasy Comics, and this was supposed to be the last issue of Amazing Fantasy.
Oh yeah.
It was like one, like these comics where it's an amalgamation of different things. So it was one of the stories in that, and this is where he went to Kirby to draw it, and then his style was not appropriate for the thing because he's like, oh, he's a teenager and it's awkward and whatever. So this is where he gets Ditko. Then months later, it's bumping. Fan letters come in.
I love that.
And Goodman's like, "Oh, you put this in here."
What'd you do?
Yeah, wait a second.
Good.
It's a hit. But the problem is, they still can only do 8 titles.
Yeah.
They're still in this embargo from being bought by this other company. So he's coming up, just blasting through, coming up with the Hulk, coming up with Thor, coming up with Iron Man. But they have to drop the Hulk in 63 because they can only put in 8 different ones at 8 different things at a time. The Avengers also comes out in 63. And the X-Men also comes out in 63. So the early 60s. He just went on a landslide after this Fantastic Four. He was like, we're going.
His mind just opened. Superheroes!
Yeah.
Onto the page.
And so the 2 other things that he does that are different in comic books that separate him from everybody else in this time frame and forever is he wanted, kind of like social media now, fan engagement. He didn't want it to be this weird separation between you pick up the comic, you read it, and then you throw it away. He's like, no, there are people behind this. We want to know what you think.
Well, we broke down that barrier and beat it with a beat it with a bat.
Smash, like, subscribe, comment.
Yeah, no, everybody thinks they are a corporation.
On their own.
That's the difference. It's been the artists on the corporation side trying to bridge the gap to the audience. What it's really become is pulling the audience into the corporation, and now you can be a part of them and not get paid.
Yeah, you can help us with everything, and then
thanks.
So he comes up with this thing called the Marvel bullpen page. It's him answering questions. It's replying to fan letters. He has this thing called the Marvel No Prize, where if somebody submits something funny, he'll send them just like a envelope with nothing in it.
I love it.
Just like having fun with them.
That's so fun. I love
writing
that.
stuff. People are asking like, how did you come up with this? How are you doing this? What does this person do? It's just a whole big back and forth every single issue. He's putting forth all this effort. I think that's what goes unnoticed maybe. It's like that's like a ton of extra stuff that potentially has no return, but that's why people are buying it.
The return is just the buying it, the engagement at all. I love that.
Yeah, so
I love that because it's a little bit more genuine than like commenting on an Instagram post,
right?
Or, something like it's actually like sending here. I will hand write you an envelope back full of nothing because it's a joke because you wrote me something
and maybe nobody else will ever hear about that.
No, it's just look, somebody had that little experience or however many experiences with it, that's incredible, and it's just between them,
and he carried that over until he was 95 years old. At every single Comic-Con he would sign everything. He was the most popular person at all this stuff because he never stopped. He never got tired of explaining how he came up with Spider-Man. He probably said how he did that 12 trillion times in his life, and he said it with the same smile and enthusiasm when he was 94.
That really is a marvel. Never a sign of jadedness all the way to the end, man.
He was so excited.
Loved it all, loved everybody. That's super true. I mean, people get tired of saying the same thing in a short amount of time. You see actors going on a press tour for a movie they only have to support for 6 weeks, and they just cannot. They can't sit in the chair. They're melting out of the chair by the end of it. It's just, he went his whole life being asked the same question about Spider-Man and Fantastic Four.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's hard for me to think about the difference between him and Jack Kirby, who grows jaded from all of this. Because Stan Lee did make potentially a lot of sacrifices to be the face of this. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's hard for people to conceptualize, 17 people worked on this, and what does a colorist do versus the artist versus the editorial? Like, it's confusing.
Yeah.
So to just be like, Stan Lee, he made the comic.
Right.
And he's a cool dude, and he's willing to answer questions, and he's fun. So be it. That helps get comics into the mainstream as opposed to confusing people with all of this different credits and stuff.
It's like a taste of celebrity director almost, before the really is, like Hitchcock.
Yeah.
That's just
he was
happening
the
right barely at the same time. So
Yeah, so this is the mid-60s. He starts adding, instead of, so what the traditional Martin Goodman way is like, cool, keep pumping them out, add more. Stan Lee's like, no, we want to add more to what we've already created. So we're going to interconnect them. We're going to create romance. We're going to add depth. Smoke.
Oh, God. Well, don't tell me you're not going to do it, because I know you'll just do it anyway behind my back, and it'll be great. So don't do it! But do it.
So things like in the first Spider-Man that gets his own thing, he's trapped by the Fantastic Four. So he's already merged the two comics together. Same thing with the Avengers coming into play. He integrates, like, where he has his thing in the back where he's talking to guests. Doctor Doom captures Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in an episode. Yeah, he just merges it all together, breaks the fourth wall, because fans
like he lost his mind one night. It's like he adaptationed it with with Charlie
What
Kaufman.
if I got taken over?
He adaptation that whole thing.
But people love
Dr. Doom will come in here. Me and Kirby will be a part of it. Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Kirby's like, I don't know if we should draw it.
Stan, are you all right?
People love it, though. This is also when he came out with Black Panther in '66, again breaking the trend, the first black superhero.
Oh, wow, 66.
Yeah, getting his own thing. Going back to Batman, this is when the Adam West show comes out, '66.
Oh, hot.
So this is the idea of like, maybe this can be adapted into something else and doesn't just have to stay on the page. But there becomes a slump in the late '60s. People grow tired of it. It's just a constant roller coaster. It's an up and down. It's hot. It's not. It's hot. It's not. So Kirby, his contract ends in '70, so he turns it down and goes to work for DC. So now he's gone.
He ain't real.
So it was just the time frame of the '60s where he and Stan Lee were working together, coming up with all this stuff, and then he dips again.
You didn't know what you had, man. You didn't know. Come on, man. No.
Yeah. So in the rest of the decade, it's again constantly an up and down, but I'll just kind of go through some of the highlights until we get to the big resurgence in the 2000s. Going back to the comics code, though, this was also part of it. So this is where things kind of open up. The U.S. Drug and Health Administration went to him, and it's like, we got to do something about all this drug use.
Oh.
So very important issue, Spider-Man number 96. Norman Osborn is addicted to pills, and it's like, Spider-Man knows that he's Green Goblin at this time. A bunch of stuff happens. He goes to talk to Harry, who's Norman Osborn's son, and Harry has overdosed.
Oh, God.
And has to take him to the hospital.
Oh, my God.
Norman sees this and freaks out and changes his... It was like a huge, huge thing in the story.
It's not about fighting crime at all.
Yeah.
It's about saving lives in a personal way.
Yeah.
In a way that all of us can do.
Yeah. And so the comics code is like, wait a minute, they're talking about drugs.
Hey!
So this did not get the seal of approval.
Oh.
Which was like the first major one that was like, wait a minute. But this
I
is
love
Spider-Man.
that they still do it because it just needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like, it just needs to be told. Like, I love that.
And then the comics code got abolished after that because they were like, wait a minute, we should, yeah. Spider-Man number 96 was when that happened. In 72, now we're moving into the 70s, Lee gets promoted from the editorial director to he becomes the publisher. Martin Goodman, see ya.
No! Martin Goodman, where did you end up?
Gone.
Oh, no.
Retired. He said, I can't do it
Shuffled off
anymore.
the pages of this.
Well, the company's in disarray. They're having all these different buyouts and all these different switches to different, it's all the financial nonsense of that.
I hope he was hot and cold until the end of his life.
Yeah. I'm retiring. No, I'm not. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Is everybody retiring? Yeah.
Reston Goodman.
Based on his legacy, though, just in 73 for some context, still superheroes. There's only 28 superhero comics that they're doing. There's still 16 mystery ones and 10 westerns.
Good lord.
So it's not what we think of,
Right.
even after all of that happened in the
Right.
60s. So in the 70s, the big deal that saved them was Star Wars.
Oh.
They got the rights to do that comic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't. Oh, that makes sense. I know a little bit about this now.
Yeah. So in the 70s, the big deal was they weren't really doing their own thing, but they're trying to do merch, TV shows, books, Hollywood. This is where you get all the crappy animated Marvel shows that just didn't really go anywhere. They're trying to sell stuff. And Stan Lee...
I used to watch the old 60s animated Spider-Man. I used to have them on DVD, like as much of them as I could get. It was a weird time in the 2000s when they would put like 4 episodes of a season on DVD and put it out and be like, this is Spider-Man.
Nobody
weird,
remembered
but
it.
yeah. So I watched a lot of those. They were pretty good. Like I liked them. Like they're quaint and they're certainly dated, but like I recommend them if just to get a taste of like the transformation of all of this.
Where
stuff.
it was still campy, and I think they were still going off of the '66 Adam West.
Yes, definitely,
kind of
absolutely.
Stuff. And he was like, "Wait, this is not what we're writing in the comics."
No, yeah.
So like, why is this being translated weird? So that's the constant battle. And it's interesting to think about, just for some context, now that the movies do have what the comics had in the '60s in terms of the depth of character and connections and interwovenness. The fact that he was trying to do that in the 70s, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. So this has been a constant journey for him in making
he had a
that
crusade to make comic books more intimate and personal.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
And now we changed it for everybody.
Yeah. And now we get to see it in this other medium.
Because you don't think, because harkening back to our episode about Watchmen, this stuff has to happen first before that can. Like this is the baby step, and then Alan Moore takes, well, you want to get real,
Yeah.
But like he can't do that unless there are like Fantastic Four dealing with some menial problems and those types of things,
and still going into outer space.
He has the ideas like, well, what if we turned it into absolute horror? So it's interesting to see how you need these baby steps from different people, and everybody's input helps the medium, and everybody gets to add their little piece if you're lucky. I like that being able to. Now we're talking about 3 different episodes here that
intersect. Even the human beings in their lives intersected.
Yeah.
So speaking of the intersections, the baby steps. Superman, the live-action movie, comes out in 78, which doesn't really fit in with his style of, like we said, the personal comic book, whatever. But it proves that, we can get into the live-action, we can have a feature-length film.
Right.
Stan Lee moves.
It's a little more serious than the Adam West movie, because the Adam West TV series did a movie,
wacky,
but it was still very much the vein of the TV show. It was wacky. It was a very long TV show,
cartoony.
So it wasn't really like pushing buttons. Yes, it was a feature film, but it was just the comedy that we knew in the TV show. So this was actually
another step in that direction.
Being like, no, this could be its own. If we take this a little more, it's not quite the book, but it's a little more the book, and certainly than the way they went with Batman.
Right. So Stan Lee, because of that, moves to L.A., and at this point, he has nothing to do with the comics. He's written his last Spider-Man issue. He's done with that.
I've written my last Spider-Man issue. It was fantastic, but I've got to move on.
We got movies to make.
Movies. Hello, L.A.
He's sitting out in the sun. He made this little cardboard box for him to type over so it wouldn't melt the keys. And
oh my!
You're like, what are you doing, Stan? Sitting in the courtyard. He's like, I love this.
I gotta live that L.A. life, baby.
So going back to things happening in real life, the Doctor Doom stealing him. Spider-Man got married in real life.
In real life?
In 87, yeah. Because of the issue where he marries Mary Jane. They had an actual wedding with actors at Shea Stadium.
Oh my
the
gosh.
Met Stadium in New York, yeah. And I'm going to put in the email, but there's the Good
there
Morning
video of this?
America
Oh my
piece
gosh,
on it where they
please.
interview Spider-Man and Mary Jane.
No way. I have no memory. Oh, I have no recollection. I'm
real
not
life.
never knew this, but I've got to see this
Yeah.
immediately. As soon
It's
as we're done.
wild. And Stan Lee's there, and they're like talking to him, and they're like, "Oh, this has been a long time." But it's also weird
It's
because
like
they're
a
sort of
circus. It's like,
breaking the fourth
Yeah.
wall because Stan Lee is there, who made them, and they're like asking him why he decided they should get married. It's like, I don't understand what reality we're in.
that is world bending. Do not show that to a child because it will take years to sort that out.
Yeah, so that's kind of where he's at, where he's trying to get the film stuff going on. He's trying to incorporate other things, but he has nothing to do with the comics in terms of the creative process. They're kind of their own machine now.
Well, he gave his. Well, I mean, and that makes sense. He did his part. Now the new generation, he can still kind of shepherd this thing, take in the company in new directions, while people now know how to make these stories. Now they're breaking their own ground because he's laid some baby steps. Now
Yeah.
they're going in those directions. They're going in directions that he can't because he's given what he could to
Yeah.
that area of it. Now he's focused in a different area.
They're still going downhill though in terms of finances. They get bought by a larger company.
Yeah.
In '89, the Batman film comes out, and they still have not been able to create anything in a different medium that matches what DC is doing. In 1996, they have to file for bankruptcy.
Good Lord.
Marvel does.
Where was I?
What happened?
I'm 4 years old. I wasn't giving my piece. I wasn't giving my part.
You weren't doing it? You weren't buying any of their comics?
Ugh. God, Evan.
They just had poor acquisitions. The guy that bought the company, he was investing in trading cards, and the way that the system was set up, people would buy like 5 issues of a comic so that they could get all the cards. But then people got tired of that, where they're like, I don't have the money for this.
Yeah.
So it inflated their numbers, where it was like they weren't actually selling this many copies. It was people were buying them so that they could get the 5 different trading
Right,
cards.
Gimmicks.
So they merge with Toy Biz, who Avi Arad was a part of, and then he started all the film
that's
stuff.
how he
and
comes
then
in.
that's
Yeah,
how-
interesting.
he's the
'Cause I've
toy
always
guy.
known about that guy because obviously I've been interested in the movies since they started making them.
And for those that are listening, you'll see his name on all of the old, like
Yeah.
the X-Men, the first Spider-Man, all that
If you
stuff.
watch
He
any
was there
special features, man, he's gonna be there. He is the Marvel cinema guy
at the start, yeah. So he came from Toy Biz when they merged so that they could stay afloat
what a
in
career.
96.
So he's doing toys, and,
And
then
then
he
they
comes
switched
over to
him over-
comics, and then he becomes a film
Film
producer.
Yeah.
Like, and not only a film producer, but he also like he is the mastermind behind what they started, what we're in the middle of now.
Yeah.
He's not from Hollywood. He's not a Hollywood guy. He's a
Right.
toy guy.
Yeah.
Comics, movies, changes the face of like we are. I don't know if anybody's aware of it, but we are stuck in a cycle of recycled properties right now in cinema, and it's partly because of what Marvel has set up. This universe is out of control just because everyone wants to do it. Say his name again.
Avi Arad.
There he is.
Yeah. He started it. So
All of
Stan
it.
Lee sort of gets removed from that a little bit. He's still involved, but he's still wanting to create stuff. He's like, I want to do my own thing. So there's this guy, which is a very weird diversion in his history, and this happened in the last years of his life, so it's kind of unfortunate, but he recovers from it. But he knows that he's done with the Spider-Man and all of that stuff because so Marvel owns the copyright and the he doesn't have any. He gets money on the back end for those things, but he has no say in them. So he wants to create his own stuff. He wants to do his own thing. There's this guy named Peter Paul, which is super weird.
Oh, where's Mary?
Yeah,
Peter
what
Paul
happened?
and my wife Mary.
His name is just Peter Paul. He proposes because this is in the early 2000s. .com era is coming about, new media. Stan Lee's got his finger on the pulse, but he's old. So he's like, I
His
want
old finger on the
somebody.
pulse.
Yeah. So this guy comes to him with this proposition for this company, which they call Stan Lee Media. At this time, Marvel is still sort of shaky. They haven't made any of the movies. I read that Michael Jackson was actually considering purchasing Marvel.
Oh, wow.
But that acquisition never went through. So it was like it was anybody's game. Anything could happen
So I
with
could
this
just
stuff.
have him? That would be great. Thanks.
But he didn't.
He didn't. But he did with the Beatles. I'll take these. Oh, wow.
It's a weird world in the early 2000s because of the internet. This Peter Paul guy, though, if you did any research on his background,
I'm not going to. No,
Well,
I'm just kidding.
if you did.
His
I
name
did.
makes me uncomfortable.
he got in trouble because he frauded the Cuban government. He was like selling coffee that didn't exist, and then his plan was to sink the ship on the way, so they
Never
would
mind,
never
this guy
have to.
rules. I'm gonna go look this.
They would never have to actually send the coffee because it's like, oh, the ship sank, but there was no coffee to
Oh
begin
my
with. But
God.
that was found out because the ship didn't sink, and then and then earlier on, this is in the 80s, he was found trying to get into Canada, but he was using the alias of a dead man. But why? Who are you trying to hide? Just those are two of the big things. But I don't.
Good
Stanley, I guess,
Lord.
didn't do the research.
What in the world?
So this whole company was a mess. It was all financially a disaster. He tried to run away. It was a huge
rambling con man. It's like, hey, Stan.
yeah. It was a Ponzi scheme. He's a nice guy. It's kind of like the Fire Festival, though. It was
Oh, man.
securities fraud. So he pumped up the stocks, bought stocks, using fraudulent checks, all this stuff. So then the investors, it makes it look like it's this bigger thing with all of these celebrities involved. And Stanley's corporation, he didn't really know how it worked because it's like Stanley doesn't own Spider-Man and Captain America, all these things anymore. But he was telling people that.
Right.
So like, oh, this is the new Marvel. It all went to hell.
Good
He
Lord.
got 10 years in jail. And this is when Stan Lee is now 79 years old.
Yeah.
So they thought, oh, well, this is how this guy fades off into obscurity. Nah. X-Men comes out in 2001.
Hot, man. I was all over that.
Now we're back.
That was it.
Now we're back in the scene. Stan Lee starts another company called POW. And he's just all over the place, doing all different kinds of stuff up until 95, till the very end of his life. I'm not going to get into the millions of different things, but he was like working on a musical, and he was consulting with Activision for the video games, and then of course all of his cameos, but he was writing other comics and then dipping his toes into like web comics and just doing tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of different stuff.
That's cool.
Oh, so the thing that happens in the 2000s that I thought was interesting, which appears, I think, in Iron Man as a kind of a little inside joke, he started developing a friendship with Hugh Hefner, who almost had the same life as him, but just in a different arena.
Right.
Because they both came into this world of publishing, but where Timely Comics was making the smutty, pulpy stuff at the same time, Hugh Hefner went along with that and created Playboy.
Yeah.
And then Stan Lee created comics.
Absolutely.
And in the Iron Man, he plays Hugh Hefner in the cameo.
Oh, wow. Oh.
know?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But they kind of have a similar energy, and they're goofy old men, and they're,
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you say Hugh Hefner, and go bing, 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 bing.
And they were
like
in New York at the
wow,
same time, and it was just very divergent. He was influencing kids and young adults, and Hugh Hefner was influencing
young adults.
in a different way. The last little quote I will say is the whole summation of why people dig him and his energy that he brought to the comic space is the whole thing that he said was, if superheroes can be like you, then you can be like superheroes.
Ooh, that's cool.
Which nobody else did really to that degree before him.
Yeah.
And we see that even now with the properties expanding and the new animated Spider-Man and how they changed all the comics. And he was like, I don't care.
It's a constant theme of a lot of his characters is it could be anybody. I'm kind of seeing a lot of it in just the extra things that he did of like sending those fan letters back responses and all those types of things, like bridging that gap. It's like, I am not so different from you. So it's beautiful to look back over such a long life and see so consistent.
The same energy.
Because
he could have faded into obscurity at any
time.
He could have faded in the 70s.
Anytime, man. And he never did. I mean, right up to the end. It's not like we all didn't know when he passed away recently. It's like, it's not like anybody who's going to movies nowadays, going to a Marvel movie, you expect to see that Stan Lee cameo. You're looking for it in all of them.
And I think this Avengers movie that's coming out today, this is the last one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
God, it's going to be perfect.
Yeah. So, Evan, I've told you a little bit about the man.
A little bit.
The Stan the man. A lot of bit. What do you think? What do you think is worth talking about?
Oh man, so much. When he was creating new names for himself and giving himself titles of stuff because he's doing it all. You know, the Halloween John Carpenter thing. He's doing it all, trying to make it not look like it's just him or just, he created the image of this is a whole organization, this is a running, this is a company, this is what we do, to an outsider it looks like a legitimate run business, when inside, if you were in the office, it's just him sitting at a desk going like, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to be the one man show. You have to create the job and then hand that job off to somebody. You have to be the example, and he did such an amazing job of just forging his own path, teaching others how to do it, and then letting them go and being like, see, this is what, and then now you have this, and then he ran off in a different direction all the time. I think he just has a lot of trust in the connection of people. If you can invest in people, if you can help them feel a part of it, which it seems like was also big with him. He wanted to credit people. It sounds like he did once.
And in the back of the book where they're asking
off.
questions, and he'll be like, oh, this person is, and this is how they do it. He opens up the doors for people to see that it is a bunch of people.
I mean, and to have been an audience member in that time through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where you do have that just huge wall between the artist and the audience, for somebody like that to be breaking down that barrier, to be accessible.
And he was going to college campuses, and he was promoting it elsewhere. He was all over the place. He was on late night talk shows. He was doing stuff.
All he's ever doing, if it's in person, if he's talking, if he's writing a comic book, like all he's ever doing is saying, you can do this too. That's why it connects. I mean, people see that in themselves and they go, oh man, I'm not alone. But if you are not offering up something honest, if you're not offering up a piece of genuine experience or hurt or thought or anything real, then what is there for the audience to gain?
And that's why it's fascinating that the movies have carried such weight as they do.
Yeah.
Because to have such a gigantic machine in operation, hundreds of millions of dollars per movie, thousands of people involved, and it still hits those marks.
Yeah. And the personal stories there, I mean, they're all right there. Personally, I draw issues with more of just the overall aesthetic. I don't like them looking all exactly the same, but it makes sense. I get it.
Right.
But that's just a personal thing. But like down to the interpersonal dramas, the character dramas, what's going on between them all.
His legacy remains in that.
It's very. I mean, it is the backbone of why people are interested.
Yeah.
Second, most in my mind is Joan the Rock Johnson. I mean,
Joan, his wife.
Joan, just the. A 70-year marriage, just a lifelong support system. And
I wanted to bring her up because she disappears in the story.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
But that's almost the beauty of it, is that, like, that there was a foundation there. There was a support, that she did support him.
She cameoed with him in X-Men Apocalypse, I think. They're like an old couple together.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But that's like her only appearance in the films.
That's awesome, though. I'm glad that she got to do that.
Yeah, but just that she's been there since the beginning,
and that she has the kind of the genius in the middle of his whirlwind of not feeling like a failure. She just leans in and goes, well, you could just do what you want.
And the worst that will happen is you'll get fired, and
right.
then you were going to do that anyway. So
it's like, well, everything's in the trash. Why don't you just do what you want and see what happens? And if it fails, then it was already failing. So perfect. No, all she did is lean in and was like, well, you could just do what you want. And it's like, oh my God. And look what happened. Fantastic Four. I mean, you need those people. You need somebody that's willing to just lean in and say, this is what's going on. This is what's at your feet if you'd look down.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the roller coaster, just sticking with it. That's another huge thing, man, is he just learned the game of just he had the foresight and the longevity to see that, no, okay, there'll be ups and downs all the time, but if you just stick with it and diversify, I can ride this roller coaster all the way back around and maybe go for a few more rides, But it's people like Jack Kirby who are just what's happening right now. They get the low, they get the high, and they're off. It's down. No, I can't take this anymore. Off. I got it. I'm gone. And it's like, no. Stan Lee's like, wait, if you can just hold on, if you can invest, if you can buy in, you can ride this thing all the way back around. You never know what can happen. Jack Kirby never knew that he could be Stan Lee if he would have just stayed with things. You never know telling what would have happened. I guess looming largest, because it goes through his whole life, his personality, his work, is the ever search for continuing connection. He's always about bringing people into the fold. He's always about exploring new ways, new things, new people, building things. And it's all about you can too. It's always about bridging that gap of just like, whoa, don't get thinking you have to do whatever your dad did as a living. Hold on, whoa. What are you about?
Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating to have had somebody of his stature now from the hindsight of it, but his stature through the 60s and 70s actually being
And
available.
the endurance, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's unmatched. I mean,
Because
never change.
people fade out, people disappear, and
people get off the roller coaster.
like with these, now we're seeing these cameos that he has, and it's interesting to see his. Maybe it's a purposeful injection of himself into his work. That's because it's his nature. But like we were talking about, getting attacked by Doctor Doom so early on, and then he himself as Stan Lee the person is in some of his.
Yeah, that happens. That ends up happening a couple more times, like in some cartoons and stuff. But I never knew it happened.
He's on The Simpsons. I mean, he's all over the place. But just that legacy is he is now, not only the work is the representation of him and what he struggled with, but he is that work.
Yeah,
literally
he's exemplified the everything. I mean, it's amazing. Like,
and because he's
so
put himself
authentic.
in it, he will never be removed from it.
Right.
Where you'd be
Ever.
like, oh, who did that? What was that about?
Right.
I saw that, but I don't remember anything. He will always be synonymous with the superheroes.
He's of it just as much as the characters.
Yeah.
He is a character in it now. I mean,
Bizarre.
You know,
but incredible at the same time.
Amazing. This was a really fantastic one. I really enjoyed this one.
Would you say it was an incredible, amazing,
I would
super?
Oh man, this was the Excelsior
of episode. He's copyrighted that phrase.
No. Gotta bleep it. No. This was. I mean, I always hoped and assumed that he just was a genuine, authentic guy, but it really is just like so relieving to like, oh man, no, he was consistent and authentic and just wanted to bring people in all the time.
Yeah.
Even when they couldn't see that. And that's that. I mean, did he ever write that novel? I don't think so. You know, it's like, so
he wrote a poem that was in a section of interviews that I read. That was his favorite poem that he wrote. But no, he never wrote the novel. But his whole work is a great American novel.
And I think so. And I think it goes far beyond. I mean,
modern mythology.
Yeah, no, it goes far beyond having written one piece of American literature. That he has created and permeated pop culture and the zeitgeist of current culture, of current pop
over
culture.
60
it's
years.
Insane.
It's amazing. Yeah, as you go see Avengers in the coming weeks, I'm sure you will, and all the memes and all the jokes and everything that follows after this movie, be thinking about. Started from the comic book, started from this one guy and the team around him.
It's all about not being so different than the person next to you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening so much.